Mystery lights sighted in Michigan. The following report was made in the Brown City, Michigan Banner for February 9th under the byline of Linda Falconer. A number of local people reported seeing some strange lights in the sky on January 31st. The lights, described as a line of about 5 very bright spots, were spotted in the northern sky and seemed to be located to the north and west of Peck. Residents reported watching the objects, which were motionless and quiet for about 30 minutes. A spokesperson from Selfridge Air Base in Mount Clemens said that the lights didn't belong to the base. Our planes, which usually fly over that area, are all stationed in Saudi Arabia, so we know it wasn't them, said Alice Arrington of Base Public Affairs. Arrington said that the lights could have been linked to a NASA project. I remember that NASA had an atmosphere testing experiment planned for about the time that the bombing started in Iraq, and I know they delayed it, said Arrington. Their project involved some type of very bright lighting, and I don't know if this might have been what the people up here were seeing or not. However, NASA spokeswoman Mary Ann Peto couldn't add to the Selfridge information. We are doing some lighting experiments which cause a reddish glow, Peto said. These are only visible in the southeastern U.S. Regardless of what the military people say, the folks who saw the lights know they weren't swamp gas. They looked really close, said one caller. They went off and on, and every time they came back on, they were in a different formation. Another caller said although the lights were strange, they were not frightened by them. I thought they were landing in our yard, she said. Possible Coatesville, Pennsylvania landing reported on June 10th. Staffer Michael P. Relihan of the Westchester Daily Local News filed this unusual account on June 12th. Within the past year, it survived the recession, a crippling 111-day steelworkers strike, and the abrupt loss of key executive personnel. But now, Lucan Steel Company faces an even more potentially dangerous threat: alien invasion. Well, maybe. The company is investigating reports that one or more employees saw an unusual object land at the plant Wednesday, according to the Lucan spokesman, Evelyn Walker. According to one source, the object was a flying saucer, silver in color with rotating multicolored lights circulating around its watermelon shape. While some dismiss the episode as people getting too much sun, employees at the company are talking about it. And a UFO researcher said that acceptance by the public of the sighting as fact will be larger than many would think. The UFO is said to have landed about 4:30 p.m. Wednesday in the middle of the steel yard on a steel plate. The source, who is the husband of a Lucan's worker and asked not to be identified, said it touched down briefly and then took off towards the old Coatesville hospital. However, a worker who was at the plant at the time of the sighting said he saw no flying saucer. I saw a balloon in the air, said Gerald Wischuk. I don't think there was anything to it. Whether or not the sighting was valid, it had become talk of the company by Thursday. There were rumors flying all over the mill, said the wife of one Lucan's worker. I heard a couple of people talking about it, said John Semple, an employee at the Lancaster Archery Supply 2 target range in Thorndale, where the mill workers come to relax. I heard they saw a silver-type object with lights on it, and several different people are supposed to have seen it, he said. It's a little far-fetched, but I guess anything can happen. Personally, though, I think the people just got too much sun, he said. Walker, the company's corporate spokeswoman, acknowledged Friday that apparently one of our security guards did see an unusual object above Lucan's property. Lucan's is still investigating the incident. Walker refused to answer a reporter's questions about how many employees saw the object, what they saw, or when they saw it. The account varies from person to person, Walker said. She said, however, that the company had not yet come up with a reasonable explanation for the report. It takes a while to determine what it might have been, who saw it, was it an object, and what created the object, she said. Walker also declined to say whether Lucan's employees were discussing the sighting. You're the first person that has called me about it, she said. A Coatesville police spokeswoman said Friday that no one had contacted the police about the sightings. To David Jacobs, an assistant professor of history at Temple University who has studied the UFO phenomenon for years, the fact there was a sighting is not surprising. What is unusual is that it was reported at all. According to Jacobs, the U.S. Air Force estimated as long as 1947 that only 1 in 10 UFO sightings were reported. Jacobs thinks the numbers might be closer to 1 in 100. The stronger the evidence, the less a person wants to talk about it, he said. If they see something in their backyard, then mum's the word. Jacobs believes, however, that sightings of UFOs are much more accepted in the days of E.T. and Luke Skywalker than they were in the 1940s and 1950s. There's still a great deal of skepticism, to be sure, he said, but there is far less fear than there was in the beginning of the phenomenon. There are so many people who have seen these things that the acceptance level is far greater than you would imagine, Jacobs said. Jacobs said the one thing that distinguished the reported sightings from others is that it supposedly happened in public. They're usually not seen in public areas, like the steel yard, he said, but broad daylight in the middle of day, that's not unusual at all. This story comes from the 1955 autumn edition of Flying Saucer News. Did a space visitor land in Bradford? The night of August 15th saw considerable saucer activity over Yorkshire. A golden ball was reported from Silsden in the direction of Ilkley. A white streak was seen flashing along the water's edge at Morecambe, traveling toward Heysham Harbour, and a cigar-shaped object was observed traveling slowly across the sky over Wakefield, which seemed to be fluorescent and illuminated in various colors. The strangest story, however, concerns the thing that a Bradford lorry driver and his 13-year-old son say they saw hopping up Round Hill Street at 4 o'clock the following morning. Our correspondent, Jack Ibeson, interviewed the witnesses, and here is his report. Ernest Suddards, a matter-of-fact type lorry driver, aged about 35, married with 2 children, said he himself always laughed at unusual news reports such as flying saucers. But this incident had him completely shaken. He and his son had just been to collect the lorry from a garage about a mile away. They were coming down Round Hill Street, and as they were almost a few yards from their home, their blood chilled and their hair almost stood on end, for approaching them in the glare of the headlights was the thing. Mr. Suddards described it as being like a boy or small human being, 4 feet tall, dressed in skin-tight black clothes, arms down by the side and feet together. It did not walk, but hopped, or more correctly, jumped in jerky movements, both feet together, and seemed dazzled by the headlights. Most revealing feature, which shone distinctly in the headlamps, was a circular silver disc, perforated with holes and situated on the chest just below the throat. The thing moved forwards another few yards, then turned abruptly right into a passage below Mr. Suddards' home. He and his son sat in the cab of the lorry, stunned and unable to move, for some time, and Mr. Suddards remarked to me that he would not have gone up that passage for £1,000. Eventually they went home, and Mrs. Suddards confirmed to me that they had been shaky, pale, and looked as though they had seen a ghost. They were fully half an hour in recovering and deciding what to do. The police arrived a few minutes after being telephoned and questioned both Mr. Suddards and his boy separately, and since both gave the details with great clarity, the officer decided there must be something in it, and organized a search of the neighborhood. However, nothing at all was found. Mr. Suddards told me how he was derided and laughed at by his workmates the next day. But they can say what they like. I did see it, he affirmed. He didn't report it to the local newspaper, but they came to see him after seeing the police report. The only evaluation to my mind can be that Mr. Suddards was telling the truth, and that the details were correct. Animal? I don't think so. Not moving in jumps, there being no loose kangaroos in the area, and in any case, what animal has a silver perforated disc on its chest? Boy? It could have been, but what child would be out at the time in the morning with hands and feet tied? Moving in jumps is very tiring. I tried it. No, we have to recognize that it was some strange form of humanity, but not apparently of this world. The perforated disc could have been a breathing aid, and moving in jumps may be quite common on some other planet, with perhaps less gravity than ours. The matter may well have rested there, But a little while later, I had a phone call from Mr. Sutter's, who told me he had met a Mr. Joseph Wood in the local, and Mr. Wood, after being told of Mr. Sutter's experience, then recounted having seen a strange thing in a field about 3 or 4 days after the report of the thing. I called to see Mr. Wood and found him to be an unimaginative type, warehouseman, aged about 30, not familiar with saucers or space theories. He was walking along a shortcut near Bowling Park at about 11:30 p.m. on August 19th, when he saw, reflecting a nearby street lamp, a bright, like chromium plating, silver bullet shape stood upright behind a small hillock. The height was about 12 feet, though the base was not visible, and the diameter about 4 or 5 feet. From it was coming a high-pitched buzzing, like a radio set out of order. Mr. Wood said he went cold and shivers ran up his spine. He hurried away as fast as he could, but passed again on his return journey. He had been visiting a friend. At about midnight, he saw the object was still there. A horse approached it but suddenly started back and raced away. The area in question is within half a mile of Round Hill Street, where the Sutter's thing was seen. The Brixham Airship. A Brixham, England woman had a close look at a spectacular aerial intruder that was sighted by many in South Devon on October 6, 1969. Miss Lillian Eyre was with the Royal Air Force during the war and had an opportunity to gain first-hand knowledge of aircraft and their operations. She knows what an aircraft should look and sound like, as she has flown considerably during the years. At 10:10 p.m. on the 6th, she was standing on Windmill Hill, Brixham, looking at the sky. It was an extremely clear night as she was picking out the various star groups. Suddenly she saw what she thought was a flare on the coast near Sidmouth. I had been there about 2 or 3 minutes and was just turning around to go in when I saw this tiny red light. At first I thought it was stationary. Then it got larger and larger. Then it appeared to be not 1, but 3 pulsating red lights. Over Berryhead, there was suddenly a blinding white light lasting about 3 seconds. It seemed it was not higher than 2,000 to 3,000 feet. It was lowish, and the nearest estimated speed would be about 250 miles per hour. It looked just like an aircraft fuselage without any wings. Then I heard an engine and thought, well, it's just an aircraft after all. But the engine was not like any jet or piston engine. It was a slow thudding sound as if it was on low power. Miss Eyre lost sight of the object as it continued on in the direction of Dartmouth. She was by no means the only person to see the eerie sight, as for others in the vicinity also caught a glimpse of the craft. Mrs. J. Kimberly of Brixham was with her husband at the Brixham Yacht Club when she saw 3 red lights coming from the direction of Torquay headed towards Brixham. As the object got near, she saw a bright white light flash on which she described as being similar to an aircraft landing. Said the former airline stewardess, "We thought it might have been a helicopter, but I really don't think so. I don't really believe in UFOs, but it was very odd." Mrs. P. Garrett of Kinkerswell was sitting in her husband's car at about 9:45 p.m. near Oddicombe Beach, where she spotted the object. We had gone out to give the dog a run, and as I was waiting in the car, I saw 1 red light in the sky. Then it became much brighter. It appeared to be above Sidmouth, and after remaining stationary for a while, it moved a short distance and stopped again. My husband thought it might be a helicopter, but for some reason I wasn't convinced. It was still there when we left about 10 minutes later. Another to sight the visitor was Mr. T. Blackmore of Dartmouth, who was at home when the object approached from the direction of Brixham. Mr. Blackmore, who served in the RAF for 5 years, heard the object making a slow, thudding sound and saw intense bright lights. Mr. H.G. Shepherd of Torquay was driving down Fleet Street when he saw the cluster of red lights passing over the Riviera Hotel. It was extremely low for an aircraft, and I could not see any navigational lights. After first sighting the object at 8:15 p.m., he saw it off and on for almost a half hour. So excited about sighting the UFO, Mr. Shepherd called his friend, Mr. R. Smith, and told him to have a look. Mr. Smith hurried over to Ilsham to observe the object along with Mr. Shepherd. With the aid of a pair of binoculars of Mr. Smith's, they could see 3 or 4 closely clustered lights, and then 2 flashing red lights slightly higher. Shepard estimated the altitude of the UFO to be about 500 feet, and noted that it was moving slowly. They lost sight of the object as it moved out into Lime Bay. Mr. Shepard was interested to know that his father had seen a similar object the same night from their house in Wacombe. What was the object that flew around the Brixham area that Thursday night? From the descriptions given by witnesses, it certainly was no aircraft, and hardly some sort of natural phenomenon. This multiple witness case must be chalked up as an unknown. UFOs and mystery planes in Minnesota. Paul Adams of the Faribault, Minnesota Daily News reported the following regarding this incident of April 2nd in the paper's April 5th edition. Recent events in Faribault have all the makings of a good 1950s B movie. Strange lights in the sky followed by the sudden appearance of military aircraft behaving in an odd manner have left numerous witnesses with a lot of unanswered questions. No one seems to know whether the lights several local residents saw were something from out of town, out of state, or out of this galaxy, but there are some things everyone is certain of. What they saw has not been identified. It was flying, and its physical properties suggest that it was, you guessed it, an object of sorts. The only thing missing was the sound of Orson Welles over the airwaves. So far, none of the witnesses are using the term UFO, lest peaceful Faribault be molested by reporters from shopping market tabloids. However, one local man and several of his neighbors on Robards Lake say what they saw was cylindrical, well equipped with lights, and was either moving slowly or hovering. Dick Feichtinger, owner of Paradise Theater in Faribault, first saw the object while driving to work Tuesday night. I saw this object that was oblong, but it seemed to be hanging up and down. Rather than horizontal, it was vertical. I thought it was sort of odd. I have never seen anything like that before. Feichtinger said the object was white and very long and narrow. He also reports there were not many clouds in the sky that night. It was about 7 p.m. and still fairly light out. Later, as he was heading home, Feichtinger saw the object again. This time it was red and green. Feichtinger rolled down his window to make sure the lights were not a reflection, but the image was the same. The fact that it wasn't horizontal is strange. From the configuration and the way it was hanging, that was what drew my attention to it. He continued to track the object until he pulled into his driveway. Then he summoned his wife and children outside, and they also saw the object. Feichtinger called neighbors and friends. Before long, there were several witnesses to the object. Those witnesses say the object was red, green, and at times solid white. It also tended to move around as though guided by some intelligence. But what really fed the already active curiosity of witnesses was the sudden appearance of what some describe as military aircraft. I couldn't miss them. I thought they were going to land on my house, said Steve Kelly, who lives on Robards Lake. Kelly saw 2 very large planes flying extremely low and at a reduced speed. He said the planes were flying very close to one another, or nose to tail. I've never seen anything like that at night as far as planes flying in this area. Feichtinger also saw the planes. As he stood under a streetlight, he waved to them. As they flew overhead, one of them briefly turned on what seemed to be floodlights. They were flying so low I couldn't figure out what was keeping them up there, said Feichtinger. Later, more aircraft appeared in the area. Feichtinger said his son counted as many as 11. Other witnesses say they saw helicopters as well as planes in the area. The 2 large planes made a few loops around the lake and eventually left. The unidentified light in the sky also left, leaving behind many residents who will be looking over their shoulders for a while. A spokesman for the Air National Guard admitted there were 2 C-130 aircraft flying a routine training mission in the Faribault area Tuesday night. The C-130s are large, cargo planes capable of flying at low speeds and low altitudes. Lieutenant Kevin Guthnich said one of the pilots of the planes reported turning on some of his landing lights while in the area. However, Guthnich said there were no other aircraft reported in the area, and the two C-130 pilots said they didn't see any strange lights in the sky. Feigstinger and other witnesses say they have no explanation for the incidents. Some think it might have been a balloon. However, the National Weather Service ruled out that possibility. A spokesman for the service said there were no balloons released in the area, and a balloon would not have any lights attached to it. Guthnich was equally puzzled by the description of the unidentified object. I have no idea what it is. It doesn't sound like anything we have in the Minnesota military inventory. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you want more videos like this, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. You can even add your own spooky stories in the comments or on my Reddit page r/IHaveASpookyStory. Maybe your story will end up in the next video. Good night, sleep tight, and don't let the shadows bite.